Oh, it's telling me that we're live. And what can I say? I believe my computer when it says it's live. Folks, welcome to the weekly Spinner Rack. I'm your host, Chris. What is this? Well, if it's your first time here, first of all, welcome. If you've watched it before, welcome back. There we go. That's my new guarantee. I'll either welcome you or welcome you back. And this is a show where we're going to talk about the past week's comic book news. We're going to talk about the latest comics that came out, and we've got something special today. We're going to do an interview with somebody that has a different perspective, has made comics, has made comic strips, and perhaps most unique to what I know and what we've had on this show before, has experience making comics through the traditional book publishing marketplace. So I think that there's going to be a lot that we can learn here. Folks, it's my pleasure to welcome Mr. Jamar Nicholas. Jamar, welcome to the show.
Hey, Chris, how are you? Thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to be here.
I appreciate that. I'm a fan of yours as well. And fortunately, we got to meet in person relatively recently at the Rose City Comic-Con. That was lovely. Yeah. Scholastic had a little bit of a presence there. How many Scholastic events would you estimate you typically do? Or is that something like quarterly, monthly? Like, what are we talking like where you sort of show up at one of their booths?
It's probably less than it seems like.
Okay.
And this might be a little inflated right now because I'm on tour right now for my newest book. So I would say generally kind of like in a downtime. Maybe like 2 or 3 things in like a quarter.
Got it.
Yeah, so it's
really
not
cool.
it's not that much. I mean, a lot of it also is just kind of from whatever my network is, or school visits, or things like that, or I get invited to a educational conference or something like that. But once in a while, I get called up off the bench.
Isn't it funny, like how much promotion comic book artists and writers have to do for themselves these days?
Yeah.
And I mean, you see that too, because I mentioned briefly, but you host your own interview show, Pencil to Pencil.
Right.
And you've had some great guests this week across a pretty wide spectrum. You had my friend Tony Moore on earlier this year, but you've talked to guys like, that are that have done self-published and DC stuff, like say like Rick Veitch, or you've got like somebody newer like Brian Lee O'Malley on. You've got like a real range of artists. Yeah. How do you guys go about lining that up? Are there people like reaching out to you, or is it more you like always sort of coordinating several months into the future?
Yeah, so let me give you a little background. So Pencil to Pencil is a weekly kind of like live stream that we put on through YouTube and also on Facebook, which is kind of like a sister project from Draw Magazine, if you remember Draw Magazine with an exclamation point.
Yep.
One of my co-hosts and also the editor of Draw, Mike Manley, who's also an acclaimed comic artist, has been one of my best friends for decades. After we kind of saw that, the whole idea of a print magazine was starting to falter, we kind of switched into doing podcasts. And then that turned into live casts once the technology made it a little easier to go live. Like with Facebook, all of a sudden there was a little camera next to your icon. Like I could turn this on. I could just start talking. And we just kind of took off from there. So there's always been 3 hosts. When we first started, it was me, Mike Manley, and Brett Blevins,
right?
Who were the hosts, and then Brett stepped back, and now we have Steve Conley, who's also a fantastic cartoonist and web comic pioneer. So I think with the 3 different angles of cartoonists who were hosting, we have a pretty strong Rolodex that we can pull from. So a lot of it is like, hey, let me see who I can find. And then once in a while, we'll have some people who show up and go, hey, I have a thing. So that part's still a little new, Chris.
That's fair.
You know what I mean? It's still kind of like, oh, wait, you're like, you want to promote something? I got to talk to the guys. We don't really have something in structure for that. But mainly, it's more like we have this just like really rich network of cartoonists and creatives that we can just draw from. And just for a quick plug, Chris, actually this Wednesday, right after the election, we have the Zitz guys are going to be on.
Oh, really?
Jim Borgman and Jerry Scott are going to be on. Yeah, so I'm really excited.
Oh, congrats! That's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what because you've got comic book guys, you've got sometimes like just artists that are in slightly different disciplines, and you have comic strip guys. You have a little bit of a background in newspaper comics as well. If you're comfortable with it, I would just love to know a little bit about something. I know in your history you worked like maybe 3 years or so at the Philadelphia Tribune.
That's correct. Yeah.
Which, if my listeners don't all know, maybe people on the East Coast will, the rest of the world, I don't know. It's the longest running African-American run newspaper. So that's like significant in and of itself. And what was your position called there? Like editorial or cartoonist or what?
I was the editorial cartoonist for the Tribune for a couple of years. And you're correct. The newspaper is super, super old. And I'm from Philadelphia, and that's where the newspaper is. And I was at a very interesting point in my freelance career where just kind of like everything was topsy-turvy, and I needed a gig. So I was, I was spinning the pinwheel of cartooning. Like, what haven't I done yet? Let me try this.
I think that's interesting, just because that sounds like even more of a grind to me than like traditional comics, where like you're like calling up your editor, you're like, look, I'm going to be late. Can you get like, a fill-in artist for at least a few pages or an issue, whatever it might be. But like in a newspaper, I assume that you were just constantly having to like just react to like news and stuff like that for inspiration.
Yeah. So what my load was, and it's weird, like as an editorial cartoonist, if somebody said, okay, you have 2 strips every week, go. And then it's like, wow, that doesn't sound like a lot, but just kind of trolling the news. And this is going back in time a little bit. It was a lot of me with newspapers all over my studio.
Oh, and really?
Just trying to like find something that I can grab onto to make a strip out of. And a couple of things that I learned about myself is that I am not the sharpest politically savvy person. Okay. You know what I mean? Like I know my deal, but a lot of it was very like local politics.
Sure.
And Philadelphia is a very kind of like rough and tumble blue collar town, so you got to make sure you're not stepping on the wrong toes, or maybe this mayor that is in office, maybe you can't make fun of him right now. You know what I mean? So there were like a couple of like unwritten rules, but it's almost just kind of like. It's like city politics also at play. So I just can't, swing for the fences every week, or they'd be chasing me down Broad Street.
I mean, I grew up, that was really my first exposure to sort of sequential storytelling. I think a lot of people, maybe less now, but like certainly like, guys of our generation, we would have grown up reading still the Sunday newspaper strips at least. And that was kind of special. You get a big section of comics. And it's cool that you at least had that experience and that exposure to the deadlines and the pressures of like, you just got to keep producing. But even if you don't focus on politics in most of your work, certainly I think you seem to draw a fair amount from your neighborhood and your community and stuff like that in a lot of your work.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Going back to like your first comics all the way up to like, Leon, which we'll be talking about.
Yeah. It's really just my kind of observation of the world is kind of obviously steered the way I, create and the way I tell stories. And one thing that I'm really excited about over all these years is that I've seen to have carved out a niche for myself with my own property. And that's not something a lot of people could say. Like a lot of people who say, hey, I worked in the indies, or I self-published a comic book for 6 issues, and you know what I mean? But I somehow was too stubborn to give up.
I'm glad, man.
So, but yeah, and all my things kind of have a lens to it, but I wouldn't say there's an agenda. And
Right,
yeah,
right. But at a certain point, you must have like just sort of like said to yourself, you know what? I love my city. Like I
yeah,
know my sister loves where we grew up. My wife loves, the Seattle area, and that's why we live out here.
hmm
Um, I, I've got like a lot of affection and nostalgia for where I grew up, but I didn't stay there. I've just sort of moved around where work takes me. Like what parts of Philadelphia have you like fallen for? What elements like make you like this is the place for me?
Well, and this is a very interesting thing for anybody who's been to Philly or knows any Philadelphians, is that kind of, I was just talking about this today. The DA was on the internet talking about not having any shenanigans at the polling places tomorrow, because if there are, Chris, F around and find out is exactly what he said on the podium, and everybody's like, "Whoa, that's the most Philly thing I've heard all day."
Yeah, they're not saying it nicely.
No. So that's probably my biggest thing that I love about this town, is that there's a grit. I mean,
Yeah,
the Flyers mascot is gritty.
yeah,
You know
gritty.
what I mean? There's a grit, and there's like we may not always win, but you kind of leave everything on the field,
Okay.
and I think that's just like a really one of the best things I love about this town. And there are a lot of people who feel like, oh well, since you're from Philly, you must really wish you lived in New York. No, we don't want anything to do with New York. We do our own thing.
No, my God, like people on the East Coast know that, like, yeah, if you've got a football or a baseball game, like you better be real careful of what jersey you're wearing, depending on which game you're going to. I'm pretty sure that Phillies, uh, I think that the Eagles Stadium might be the only one that actually has a jail in the stadium.
Yeah, yeah. So they knocked that one down. That was at
Oh,
the
okay,
vet.
that's right. That's right. See, I'm so old.
No, no, no. It's
My
cool. Yeah,
references are old.
yeah. At Veteran Stadium, the place was so rowdy. They had a courthouse in the bottom of
That's hilarious to think
it, and a
about.
judge on call. It was crazy. But
It's
yeah, I mean, a lot of Philly's reputation does precede it.
it.
But we're products of our environment.
And are you city enough that do you ever use yins? Do you ever say yins, or is that
That's that's
rural?
Pittsburgh. That's Pittsburgh.
I know it is. That's too rural, right? That's too far out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So, and I was just in Pittsburgh not too long ago, but so like yins is like how we would say yous,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Or you all, or you guys.
Just
So,
curious.
like how yins doing? But
Let me
go ahead.
Oh no, I didn't mean to talk over you. I just want
No,
to bring
I'm
up
having fun. Go ahead.
I want to bring up a visual for people because I've mentioned it like and I think we should talk a little more detail. Uh you created this character Leon
Yes.
actually quite a while ago originally.
hmm
Wh- And what's and I wanted to talk about that briefly because the little bit I know of the book industry, they tend to be a little more resistant if something has already been published before they could sort of get their hands on it. Did you ever run into any like sort of issues with that when you were bringing Leon to Scholastic?
you know what? I would say there's a little bit of yes and a little bit of no. I think
Okay.
in my instance for Leon, and just to give a little background for this, so
Yeah.
I created this character probably like 20 something years ago, and I had picked around different iterations of what this comic could be about. At one point, it was a comic strip that ran in a Delaware news monthly. Like when you go to the supermarket and there's a basket with the penny savers in it, like one of
Yep.
those type of magazines. And it kind of just like trailed on and on until I finally started to make it as a graphic novel. So the first thing I did was I self-published Leon Protector of the Playground, which came out in 2017. It was a Kickstarter. Took me a while to get it done. I got it out there, and I found out that the world was kind of ready for this kind of superhero and this kind of comic. I was kind of coming out of that end, and Chris, you're the perfect person to talk about that kind of like dark era of superhero storytelling was kind of like
Right.
coming to an end, like Kick Ass and Bloody
Yeah.
Split Teeth movies, and everything was, and like Sin City, it came and went, and everything was really really great.
Yeah.
See?
There like people like remember like the 80s into the early 90s, things were like grim and gritty. Backed off a little bit, and then it came back in, like, you're right, like a big way, like in the early 2010s and stuff like that. And so yeah, this is not like of a kind tonally with what was selling at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, not that I planned it, but I just kind of put it out into the world where it at a time where it seemed like people were really interested in having something that was lighter or more positive, or maybe had a different,
Yeah.
ideal around it. So anyway, I self-published Protector of the Playground, and it did really well. I started, tracking it on my comic book convention circuits, and I would sell out everywhere I went. And to a point, I realized that I probably needed to find the market where the stuff could do better. So
Right.
I started focusing into schools, libraries, and educators. I went into that avenue. And students, a little later, the whole Scholastic thing happened. So I still have a lot of love for comic book conventions, but the groundswell of kids that want to read this kind of material may not be walking through the comic book convention.
It's I have made an episode or two on comic tropes talking about some of these young adult books, because I really do think it's how we are likely to get some of the youngest readers and also like readers that otherwise might not be interested specifically in superheroes, depending on like their backgrounds. And I think that this stuff is like still like introduces them to sequential storytelling in a huge way. Books like Guts and Dogman and stuff. And I definitely think that Leon absolutely deserves to stand among them.
Thank you.
It's a great book. I just realized my copy's way over there. I should have had it like here as a prop. What was I trying to get to, like, as a question? Bear with me. I'm addle-minded.
Take your time.
I think it's smart not to neglect this market. I drew some stories for some educational comics. One of them in 2011 was nominated for an Eisner, so not everybody knows, but like technically I could call myself like, an Eisner nominee, and that still sells well. And it's been like over 10 years since that stuff came out. So there's a long, what do you call that? Like a long tail to this, because there's constantly a new audience, but what you're making, I think, is evergreen. Anyway, I'm obviously talking a lot to you. I'm curious a little bit more. When you decided to create a character that was going to be a little bit more all ages friendly, what was important to you in terms of developing that story?
I was just listening to a podcast about this, that everybody is, well, especially in the climate we're in, that everybody is looking for some sort of secondary subterranean agenda in everything. Like, okay, this is a comic, but what's it really about? What are you trying to sneak in here? And, maybe it's kind of naive for me to say, I just want kids to read. I just want kids to read good comics.
I love that.
Where, sometimes that blows their hair back a little bit, but that's really kind of it. I'm trying to create, especially with having like the banner of Scholastic behind me, they just, they don't just publish everything. You know what I'm saying? So
no, Scholastic is like it's the biggest deal in town for all ages and young adult like type comics. It is, and to get in there is not easy at all. It just isn't, folks.
Right. So with this platform, I know that I want to make sure my stuff has some really strong messages in it.
That's so nice.
So like in Leon Extraordinary, which is the first book.
That was the first one. I put it in reverse order here, folks.
No, it's all good. Worst Friends is what I'm promoting. So you did it,
yeah.
You did it correctly. Leon Extraordinary is basically the story of a kid who uses common sense like a superpower. And there's a couple of A, B, and C plots going through it. So in line with being a 10-year-old, he thinks that his world would be complete if all he could do is get a cell phone from his mother. So obviously his mother's like, no, you're not getting a cell phone. So by the end of the book, we find out that all the kids in the school turned into zombies from a cell phone game. So he has to save the day. So
I
there's
love
like
it.
so there's like a really kind of like thin like Indiana Jones underneath the wall thing about addiction to technology.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's not heavy handed. You know, and then there's a lot of things to do with personal responsibility, making good choices, being a good friend. Yeah. So, and that goes into the next book. But go ahead, Chris. I'm listening.
No. I don't want to talk over you because everything you're sharing is like really interesting and valuable. I was just gonna like say, having read the first book, folks, Jamar brings up these issues, but I promise, like when you're reading it, it isn't like, and this is what you should do. It really is not lecturing you. It's just
Yes.
bringing up some issues that, like, every kid in America, at least, probably most of the world, deals with.
That's right.
And I like that. I like that it isn't lectury. It's legit fun. I mean, to be clear, like Leon dresses like a superhero, and like you say, his superpower is something any of us could have. I like the way he thinks about the world.
Yeah.
I like it's like this weird mix between just cynical enough and also like hopeful and positive. Like he's a really positive character.
Thank you. One other little thing that I baked into Leon's character, especially in the first book, is that he's kind of in this place where he hasn't figured out that even though he lives in a world where supers are real, that there's something just like off the edge of the screen he can't touch. Like there's something else there that he's not getting. But he has this really acute sense of figuring out other adult superheroes, their identities. It's like, can't you see that he's got a cape tucked into his suit? You don't see that? You know what I mean?
Sense.
Yeah, he's just like keyed in and like, I don't know what you're talking about. But the one thing I want to say about this all ages stuff and these middle grade stories and things like that is I've been having this conversation with a lot of parents and families. That's my audience. It's not necessarily 10-year-olds because 10-year-olds don't walk around with credit cards naturally. I'm selling.
They might walk around with cell phones these days, but yeah.
Right. I'm selling books to the family, so I have to I have to win the whole unit over for them to take this book home.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's like my own challenge. But one of the things that I come across is that people go, oh, well, this is a kid's book. And what exactly does that mean? And I think what people think that means is that this is beneath me and it's about brushing your teeth and tying your shoes. But that's kind of selling the whole thing short.
And without like trying to like, it's not something you'd see on PBS. It's still something you'd see on like Disney or Nickelodeon if you were a kid.
Right.
But you know what? Like the best, I think everybody agrees. Like the best things for kids up through like young adults, the best of it is still enjoyable by anybody. Yes. It's just that it's aimed a little bit more at like a different audience. But for instance, there's a lot of classic Disney movies that if it's on, I'm watching them. Right. There's plenty of stuff like that. And I've read stuff by like Raina Telgemeier and who's the late Tilly Walden and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I still read that because I'm curious. I'm like, why is this so popular? And you read it and it's just a darn good story.
Yeah, and just a shout out to Raina. I was just at New York Comic Con on stage with her and Scott McCloud and a bunch of other people. It's great. If you haven't read Raina Telgemeier's work, you're really missing out. Just pick up Smile and you're going to go, wow, this is really good. And I think that's kind of what people, that people don't really seem to catch on to when you hear about the Rainas of the middle grade world. It's just like, well, what's the big deal?
Yeah.
The storytelling is really, really strong. That's what the big deal is.
And I love that you use that word because you're right. Like, it's not just good art. It's not just good writing. It's the best of it is literally what good comics do well. Panel to panel storytelling that just like guide you through it. And the author is really controlling the pace of how fast you're reading stuff. Like, it knows how to speed up and ramp up to these emotional highs and like bring things down. I don't know. I so admire some of this stuff.
Yeah.
What's going to be sort of different or unique about your second Leon book through Scholastic, Worst Friends Forever. What can we expect out of that?
Awesome. So, Worst Friends Forever is a continuation of Leon's journey. So, spoiler alert: Leon saves the day in the first book.
Yes. Yes.
So, in this now here, this is where it gets
Where do you go from there?
Right, and that's the whole what if of this book, Chris. Is that in the next book we find out that the power has gone to his head, and
Okay.
he's turned into a giant jerk. So it's kind of like what happens when you get everything you want. Sometimes it's not what you thought you were going to get. So we see him dealing with like, what does it really mean to be a hero? And also, what does that do to your friend group? What kind of friend are you? And this whole book tackles what friendship means. And these are really strong themes for young people
Totally.
that I get to explore. And you even find out more about some of the ancillary characters that you may have just written off too early in the first book. So everybody gets their moment in the spotlight.
Having worked in a couple different aspects of comics, is there anything you can share with us about what makes doing a comic through a book publisher unique? I mean, is it absolutely everything, or do they wait until you've got like a finished product and then review it, or are you having to have 1, 2, 3 pages at a time get checked by an editor? What's the process?
So, well, I've been in a couple of situations with different publishers, but I can speak to Scholastic that it's very editorial heavy. There's a lot of editorial, and for good reason. And there's kind of like milestones, deliverables, and check-ins that I'm doing with my team through the entire project. I think maybe our comic book conceit is, okay, so this book is due in 8 months, drop it in my lap, and then awesome, you know what I mean? But there's a lot of, going over the scripts, going over the thumbs, going over the tight pencils. And
I kind of figured there would be an element of that as like a quality control measure, but I've never talked about this, so I don't know.
Well, and also one of the really cool things about it is, even with QC, that's a great way of looking at it. But it's also, and what I love about the team at Scholastic is that their job is to make sure I make the best book I can.
Yeah.
That's really it. And, I feel like that's a little different in comic book world, where there's a little bit more like, where is it? What time is it? This needs to get in.
Yeah.
That's what an editor's job is, to keep the project moving.
Okay.
But there's a lot of care, and even there were points at the beginning of this which shocked me, was where the team is talking about these characters like they're real people. It's like, okay, but would Leon say this? It seems like something Carlos would say, and I'm just
okay.
So and what I say to a lot of people who aren't really familiar with how this stuff works is the editor's job is not necessarily to tell me I am wrong, or that I spelled something wrong. It's more like, what is the story you're trying to tell? And is this adding to it, or is this slowing it down? So that's
cool.
So that's one of the coolest parts about working in traditional publishing.
To me, I would value that feedback, because when I've made stories in the past, it's tricky sometimes to be objective about your own work. And to have like somebody that's giving feedback that you can trust, I do see that as an advantage. I also admit that maybe that creates more work, but like you said, the goal, everybody has the same goal, to make the best story they can.
Yeah.
I like that.
And to one of your commenters in the chat that I'm looking at about the schedule. So this is probably another thing that I find very interesting about like the traditional books thing to like say monthly comics.
Yeah.
Just imagine the stress is the same. It's just stretched over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
So, when you say to somebody, my book is due next year, that's like, oh, let's go to the beach. You know what I mean? But then you think about, how long do you have to draw 300 pages of a
That's
book?
a lot.
That's a lot. It's a lot.
And typically a book publisher is a little different than comics publishers, where you might even get an advance. And I don't know, personally, I don't like to let other people down.
Yeah.
So I feel like really, really responsible when somebody like sort of pays me anything up front or invests in me in that regard. Like, so that creates its own pressures and stress.
Yeah, right. And it's, it is interesting to look at it that way, and it's real. But it's also knowing that you're probably, and I can only speak for myself, in a
Yeah.
really good position that these people that are surrounding you are everybody's trying to hit a home run so we can win the game. You know what I mean?
I think that you do have something that is at least a triple. When I see the worst friends forever, maybe we're up to grand slam. I'm playing, but I am curious because so many people that watch this love reading comics and stories, but they also love the idea of potentially making their own.
Yeah.
If somebody wanted to go towards this sort of book route, do you feel like one of the first steps is you'd have to get a like a literary agent? Is that like a necessary requirement in this world?
Well, it's a big one. So, and even with just people who are traditional writers, you'll find that one of the hardest hills to climb is getting the attention of people that could actually help your career. Like you could write till the cows come home, but if nobody's reading it, it's like, what, you know what I'm saying? So kind of securing a literary agent is key.
Okay.
But also, we could talk a lot about that.
I bet.
So finding an agent and you guys hitting it off is almost like dating. It's a relationship.
Boy.
And just because you found somebody doesn't mean they're right for your content. Maybe they can't sell you. Maybe they don't like cookbooks. You know what I'm saying? So like all of these things kind of line up, and it may come down to is like, well, I don't think I can sell the kind of work you do. Do you try to change it to fit this person? And then you're going to be miserable like 2 years from, you know what I'm saying?
Well, I respect a couple things that you do, Jamar. And one is, now that I've read a few things by you, I go like, no, you know what? Jamar puts himself and his personality into his work. I feel the passion when I talk to you. And I think that translates also to like pencil to pencil. Like when you're talking to guests, you seem legitimately engaged, not just like, so what do you got coming up? And it's something I also tried to do, on my show is I go, I could make a lot more money if I talked about drama or if I talked about Spider-Man and Batman every week. Personally, I know I'd get burned out.
Yeah.
And I think that like it is important, no matter what type of work you do, to find a way to be passionate about it, because that's what's going to produce your best work.
Yeah. So you're so right, Chris. Thank you for saying that.
I see a lot of that in you, and I don't say that to like everybody, but I do, Jamar. And so we should like have like a call to action here. Leon, Worst Friends Forever. What that is that coming out this month?
Oh, it came out already. It's out.
It did come out already?
It came out the 1st of October.
I'm sorry. Okay.
That's okay.
I'm not always looking in the kids section. Sorry. Hey kids, what are you looking at? Transformers? No. But okay, got it. It did come out, so that's good. That's sort of what I want to know, is whether it has or is about to, but it has come out. I'm sure a lot of my viewers out there have kids, nieces, nephews, brothers, sisters. Maybe you're of the age that you want to check this out. And I do recommend it. Having read Leon the Extraordinary, I'll be getting the second book. I will. And so there we go. And because it's Scholastic, that means, of course, your local comic shop or bookstore can order it. But you also, if you need to go to your Amazons or your Walmarts or your Targets, like there's a good chance that they also can carry it.
That's right. And also try to patronize your local indie bookstore.
Yeah, definitely.
That's always a win for the home team.
Local bookstores, folks, are only too happy to order a book they know is going to be sold. In the Pacific Northwest, for some reason, there's a lot of mom and pop bookstores, and it's one thing I do like here. There's a lot of cool bookstores like that.
It's very important. But you know what, Chris? Before I go, I just wanted to finish your question, because you had asked about people who are interested in publishing or getting into traditional publishing.
Anything you have to share, we're listening.
Yeah, so we kind of stopped at agent. So that's one thing. But also, and this is maybe even doubly as important for people who are already in the comic book space, One thing that I learned from being in comics for almost 30 years and then coming into this space is that even though I knew a lot, I didn't know much about traditional book publishing. So kind of like it's almost like a check your ego at the door type of thing,
Okay.
because you're like stepping into a portal that has opened to you because you've done the work and you've been here long enough to understand the system and you know how to finish things. And when somebody says something to you like, that sounds great, can you give us 60 pages so we can look at it? You know what I'm saying? So you have to start thinking vertically
Yeah.
now instead of horizontally. So
it's so much to potentially produce if you don't know how it's going forward. That's so many man hours. That's a big commitment.
yeah, you know what I mean? And if that doesn't knock you off the shelf, then you may be all right. So like, the commitment is real, and you're putting, months and months and months and maybe years of time into something, and hopefully it gets picked up. Hopefully you get a really fat contract and you get a TV show and all that kind of stuff. But I think, having the track record of executing and finishing things and hitting your deadlines is like, it's so important that, we talk about that before all the other stuff.
Yeah, that I appreciate you sharing that with us. You've got a perspective on it that not every guest I've even been able to talk to has. So I appreciate you sharing that a lot.
Well,
thank you very much.
Thank you, bro.
So we've got Leon, Worst Friends Forever is out now, and Pencil to Pencil comes out on Thursdays?
Wednesdays. Yeah, Wednesdays, 8 p.m. EST. My coffee break things on Thursdays if you're around.
Right. Yeah, coffee break. We didn't get to talk about that much, but Jamar likes coffee.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I do.
I love that you do that, though, man. When I can, I drop in. I've got a weird work schedule, but I love it. I think it's so conversational. You're so open, and it's great. I appreciate you making some time to talk to all of us tonight, especially since it's a little later over there.
Yeah,
Philly time.
Almost time for my 9 o'clock coffee.
9 o'clock coffee, and then I assume there's somewhere that produces Philly cheesesteaks up to midnight.
That's right. We never close 24/7.
There you go. All right. Always good talking to you, man. Thank you so much for sharing, and we'll have to do this again.
All right. Thank you so much, Chris. Thank you, everybody.
Take care.
Have a great night. Thank you.
That was fun for me. I've gotten to talk to Jamar a little online, and fortunately I got to meet him in person recently. Just such a sincere and kind individual. And like I said, it was a treat to be able to talk to somebody that has a perspective of he's done some comics, he's done some comic strips, and he's done book published comics. I thought that would be pretty relevant and interesting. Thank you. That's so nice of all of you to start like dropping in the thank yous. I hope he catches that. He's the best. Like, sincerely, guys, check out Leon. Sincerely, it's good. Let's keep the show moving and go right into news. We'll do news and then comics. And honestly, I don't feel like I've got as much news as some weeks, so I might even do some drawing tonight if depending on how fast all of this goes. So let me bring this up. One thing I just wanted to mention is more of a thank you to, first of all, my viewers. Also, here, let me explain what I'm talking about. I got a comic book community award for best editing. Okay. Very, very happy to get acknowledgement. A lot of times when we do, YouTube, and we're not like, Mr. Beast level of like millions and millions, you don't necessarily get tons of acknowledgement. So the Comic Book Community Awards is a nice nonprofit that acknowledges specifically comic book content creators, YouTube, TikTok. I assume that there's other platforms that it will continue to spread into. And it's a little like a People's Choice Award. People do vote on it. So thank you to the Comic Book Community Awards for the platform, but thank you to all of you for voting. A lot of you must have, because I got to win. And I'll also say thank you to my fellow nominees in this field and a bunch of the other fields that they give awards in, because it really does sort of help motivate me to do a better and better show all the time, you know? Let's see. If you delete this message, it will prove you're deserving of an editing award. It's gone. I did it. Anyway, so let's get into the news of the week. Look at that. Oh. When you do these like thumbnails, I'm always like really conscious of like, okay, I got to like do something that like shows some emotion and like a big face because that catches the eye. But I also don't want to like look too weird, like have my like go, oh, you know, I let's just say I don't want to take the microphone and start simulating weird acts on it. I don't necessarily want that kind of attention. We'll just move right into the news. So, a different artist was intended for Absolute Superman. This comic is coming out literally tomorrow, and we're just hearing now that there was another. Sorry, if you guys don't all get it, I was reacting to something that happened in the news yesterday. All right. Thanks, Jim. Always nice to see you. Let's see. Congrats, man. Where the hell is our award for those brilliant trash movie bonanza thumbnail collabs? Right? We're not doing something right because we deserve more views on those episodes. We do deserve. I don't care how egotistical that sounds. We deserve more for the amount of work we all put in. Thank you, Jim. I appreciate that. So let's talk about this news story because this fascinated me. So this came through Sketched magazine, and they had an article on the design of Superman for Absolute Superman. That's the book coming out tomorrow. Art by Rafa Sandoval in the comic itself. But that was not the original artist that DC hired. They started like planning this stuff about a year ago. So Absolute Batman and Absolute Wonder Woman, artists Nick Dragata and Hayden Sherman had about a year to get like the book ready, the first issue. Quite a lot of time. According to this article, DC originally hired Raphael Albuquerque, fantastic artist. We all like it. And nothing against Rafa. Rafa's great too. But Raphael was originally hired to redesign Superman. These are just a couple of his designs. But Raphael was unable to keep up with the deadlines to deliver, like these designs and sketches and eventually pages due to all the massive flooding that has happened this past year in Brazil. It impacted, like his work studio. And also, if you follow Raphael on social media at all, you'll see he actually started up a charity to help a lot of his fellow Brazilians, gathering original art that could be auctioned off to raise money for people whose homes and businesses were damaged due to the severe flooding. So some of it may have been, it didn't go too into like detail with like getting a quote from Raphael. Some of that may have been a personal choice where he was like, not necessarily that he was unhoused or anything, but he may have decided like, I want to devote some energy to my community. And that's just what it's going to be. So, in some ways it sucks. In other ways, I'm sure that there will be plenty of amazing opportunities for somebody this talented and this kind. But it was interesting that the real world, impacted. This is a big book. This is a really big initiative by DC. There's a lot of units being sold, and that does mean a lot of royalties. So it just feels a little sad that somebody was impacted by something like that in this specific way. Also, because all this happened, Rafa only had about 1 month to finalize a Superman design for Absolute Superman before DC wanted to show all that stuff in July at San Diego Comic-Con. So while it's been about a year of planning, it was like about 3 months early, they were going to debut cover art and concepts for the audience. So pretty interesting. Oh, I got a super chat. Thank you, John Dorsey. As an aside to the editing award, I think many of us have enjoyed seeing how well you've grown as an interviewer as well. Your first class. That's really kind of you. I feel like I've still got it's weird. The better you get at something, the further it sometimes seems you have to go to actually get good at that. I'm very hyper aware of when I accidentally talk over a guest. I'm very, very sensitive to that. I'm trying to give them the space to tell their story. But also I also want to keep the show moving. So but thank you. Thank you. It will be very interesting to read this book, and it will be interesting to also see what Raphael Albuquerque does next. But I think that we all have to admire his decisions. Maybe I don't know how bad his studio was impacted. Maybe he couldn't fulfill this. I don't know how much of it was couldn't versus decided not to. I don't know, but yeah. And let's just keep the people of Brazil and several other parts of the world in our minds if we're in a place where we can donate relief money. There have been some severe floods throughout the world this year. I want to say I saw one in Iran in the last month. I know Spain had a really bad one where I just saw cars just being tossed down the street. Yeah, it's rough. I've gone through a flood before. It's pretty awful. It's pretty devastating. All right. Here's more of a fun one, but it's still DC focused. Megan Thee Stallion dressed as Starfire. I showed a couple of the images that she shared on her Instagram. I'll explain why she did this. So Texas rapper Megan Thee Stallion did some cosplay on Instagram for October. She dubbed it Hottie-ween. And one of those was one day she had several pictures of her as Starfire. And man, it is totally the George Perez version of Starfire, isn't it? Like, that's the original. Like, that costume is accurate. I think she looks great as this character, to be honest. I really do. Let's see. One image, this one down here, includes the background of issue 4 of Starfire's miniseries. This is just me giving trivia. That was the issue where we finally really got some backstory on Princess Coriander and her alien history. Up till there, it was sort of a bit of a mystery. Yes, I shared one in the previous image. That was by Raphael, and also in the thumbnail for this episode. Those are by Raphael. But if you don't know, Megan Thee Stallion's a nerd. She just is. And she's currently promoting her 3rd album. If you don't know, there are at least 2 tracks on there that are pretty nerdy. There's Otaku Hot Girl, and she's got a bunch of lines in there that like reference anime that I'm not as familiar with. I'm pretty sure she's got a line that sort of like ties into like Jujutsu Kaisen. I could be wrong on that. She also did Boa, and that was definitely, I think, inspired by a pirate villain from One Piece, the Boa, the pirate princess. So anyway, she's a nerd. I appreciate it when nerds, leverage their fame to give comic books a little bit more of a platform. I thought that was fun. The first tactile digital comic is coming. Yeah, there's not a lot to say about this technology, but this is coming. Webtoon announced a partnership with Dot Incorporated, and they make a Braille digital pad, basically. A digital pad that can pull up dots depending on what information it's relaying. So 2 of Webtoon's popular comics, Yumi's Cells and Hooky, are going to be made available for free in Braille on the Dot pad. Interesting. I don't know exactly how that will work. The Dot pad is, if it isn't obvious, built for the visually impaired. It can connect by Bluetooth to their phone or their digital devices, and it's got 320 refreshable Braille cells. So I don't know how much it can sort of like show of like the artwork itself. It can definitely do in Braille the language, but it'll be very interesting once it actually comes out to see what it looks like, or to hear reviews of people that use it to see what it feels like. It's a cool idea. If the technology works, I have to imagine they could expand the scope of it so that you could like really feel some of the line work as well as like read word balloons. I don't know. It's a really interesting idea. It is a little confusing because 320 cells doesn't seem like enough to show much of an image, but I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it scrolls now that I think of it. Like maybe you do a panel and you sort of like, you feel it and it scrolls up and around and stuff, because I don't think you could fit the whole image in that. It's a cool idea though. It's a really cool idea. Yeah. Tom Hanks, right. He's got a movie called Here. Boomers will think that it's a sequel to Forrest Gump because it's got Robin Wright in it, and it digitally de-ages them. I'll be honest, the trailers for that movie looked awful, but the comic itself is fantastic. If you don't know, Here is by, I believe his name is Richard McGuire, if I'm remembering right, and he did like a 6-page black and white story in Raw magazine, the underground publication by Art Spiegelman, and and Here would like have the same angle, like the shot doesn't like move or shift perspective or anything. And it's mostly of a house, like a living room. But what it does is it goes throughout time periods. Like it's got people like, different generations being in that same space. And there are inset panels that can show both like the future and the past, but things that would happen right there, all the way back to dinosaurs, Native Americans, somewhat in the near future. And then it was expanded to a whole graphic novel in color. Really cool comic. Plays with the conventions of storytelling of what you can do with panels. And I thought it was a brilliant comic. And the trailer for the movie just struck me as soulless. It just took away everything I thought was kind of cool about the idea. Yep. Tom Hanks in another comic book movie, because Road to Perdition, of course, was also a comic book movie. Robert Zemeckis has made a few things that I love. I'll always love Back to the Future. Plenty of people like Polar Express. I find it a little creepy. I liked one of those digital movies that he did. Grendel. Or Beowulf. Yeah, Beowulf was okay. Anyway. So, yes, Mazes and Monsters. Tom Hanks' first role, a TV movie that was basically based off of the stories in Chick Tracts, which I've done an episode of on Comic Tropes. Chick Tracts, those super like Baptist comic books that like condemn everything that you do. Hey, Christopher, nice to see you. Yeah, Who Framed Roger Rabbit is also great. I agree. Yeah. Did he do Flight? I didn't know that. That was a good one too. So he's off and on. Yeah, I liked your movie. All right, I'll go back to the news. So anyway, Tactile digital comic. We will have to keep up with that. There's a new Nick Fury coming to the Ultimate Universe. I thought it was interesting. He's going back to being a white guy. Went from white guy to black guy to a different black guy back to a white guy. It all depends on the continuities, right? So on sale in December, we're getting a one-shot called Ultimate Universe 1 Year In. That's going to have writers Dennis Camp and Chris Condon, artists Jonas Scharf, Alessandro Capuccio, and it'll sort of set the stage for what's coming in the second year of Ultimate Comics. As we can see from the cover here, it's going to introduce ultimate version of Nick Fury, but also the ultimate version of Wolverine that we heard last week is coming. But it'll be very interesting because in this world, this Ultimate Universe, a supervillain called Maker has really crafted this universe to fit his needs, and he's got a lot of supervillains that are secretly controlling the world. What role would Shield have in there? Would that be Nick Fury working for the supervillain? Would that be him secretly fighting back? I'm actually pretty curious about that. Oh, really? You're familiar with Cappuccio's art? I have to admit, I'm not yet. Planetary, yeah, Planetary is great, and Ultimates it's so good. It's so good. I thought that Ultimate Spider-Man would be my favorite book. It's probably Ultimate X-Men because of how different it is. Although the Ultimates is making a big case for being the best book in the Ultimate line. Oh yeah, no, I think that that's definitely intentional to sort of do a light homage to Steranko's famous covers where he would mix in pop art elements. I think that these, swirly lines are definitely meant to be evocative of that idea. Definitely. Oh, okay. Right. I guess I heard that he did do Moon Knight, but I haven't seen it. Wow. Okay. A bunch of people saying it's really good. Okay. So getting a boost up to work on Wolverine, because Alessandro is the one doing Ultimate Wolverine with Chris Condon, and I was excited because I like Chris Condon's books, That Texas Blood. I like crime comics and stuff, so I was excited for that. Are you talking about the current Ultimate Universe or the old one? I thought that I think Ultimate X-Men is doing very well. Peach Momoko is as big as ever. And the Ultimate Captain America in this is very, very, very similar to 616 Captain America. And I think that makes him very likable. I think he plays like a good sort of straight man to all the differences that are going on in the world around him. Speaking of Peach Momoko, Marvel talked about a new initiative they're doing with her. Boy, do they keep her busy. Boy, do they keep her busy. According to Bleeding Cool, they're the ones that shared this image. At this past weekend's LUCCA Comics and Games Festival, Marvel editor-in-chief C.B. Cebulski, yes, Akira Yoshida himself, announced an upcoming series of covers by Peach Momoko. Of course, Peach already does a bunch of covers, so what makes these different? It is that the series is going to show various Marvel characters redesigned in kimonos, and combined with Peach's chosen name, Momoko, these will be called Kimoko, which doesn't really mean anything. It's just a portmanteau of kimono and Momoko. I'm trying to think like what I would want to see her do with this. Who's like a really classy male character, like a male Marvel superhero that dresses well? I mean, the first one that comes to mind is, of course, Tony Stark, because he's got lots of money. But I'm trying to think if there's you know who I would like to see in this? Sunfire, the Japanese mutant who's sometimes been in the X-Men, wearing a yukata, which is basically a men's kimono. I would love to see a really traditional yukata by her. So anyway, yeah. I guess that was it. They showed this screen was the only one they showed, and this is Black Cat in a design like that. I thought that was interesting. Oh, I love the idea of Wonder Man. Yeah. Kingpin. Okay. Patch. Hello. Let's see. Marvel is definitely keeping her busy, so she can't work for anybody else. They do let her do covers for friends and people that she knows. Because, for instance, she just did that Spawn cover. Peach can still do a few other things, but they definitely keep her busy. I hope they're taking care of her, because the second they don't, she can go to any other publisher and make a lot of money. She's very popular. Bruce Banner with purple, a purple kimono. Doctor Strange is a good idea, actually, because him and a yukata would not be totally different than his typical sort of uniform, which is like layered and flowy. Matt Murdock? Well, he's got a really interesting history with a lot of, like, he should have like, a red one that looks like something somebody in The Hand would wear. But he's led them before. Right. Hello, Darkness, she did. I was thinking of that. Ultimate Paste Pot Pete. Folks, I just want, and I'm sure Marvel's happy to hear me out after I just did that Akira joke. I'm sure that they would love to hear my pitches, but I would be happy to write a Ultimate Paste Pot Pete one-shot, a guy who really thinks that paste is the way to get one over in the world, but is probably struggling at a place like Best Buy at minimum wage in the Ultimate Universe, and is just like trying to design in his free time paste-based super villainy powers so that he can rob a bank and just have that one good heist. Happy to write that for you. All right. So the Vision MCU show that's coming up, it may include speed, folks. Probably really likely to. Paul Bettany confirmed this week that he's going to be filming the Vision Quest show for Disney Plus in 2025 with an eye for early release in 2026. This week, there's a rumor of an additional cast member for the show, as the title hints. We're saying that it could be Speed. We already knew that James Spader is returning as Ultron, which I think is a great choice, actually. According to Hollywood insider Daniel RPK, the show is currently looking to hire a male teen actor as a co-lead for the show. Just using, common sense reasoning here, if we follow Agatha all along, it would seem to strongly imply that the Vision show could introduce Tommy, the other child of Wanda and Vision, who in the comics gets reincarnated as a teenager as the superhero Speed. So I think that that's super likely to happen. We'll see, but we'll see. Hello, Steve. Thank you for the support. Very kind of you. Yes, happy Monday. Happy Monday indeed. They've got a lot of potential characters at this point. If they wanted to do a Young Avengers movie tomorrow, they could. I mean, I think that you'd have to include Ms. Marvel, Kate Bishop's Hawkeye, Wiccan, possibly Patriot, because we've seen Isaiah Bradley's grandson. You could use Stature, Ant-Man's daughter. You could use, I bet Nova would be easy to introduce at this point. We've got the backstory of the Nova Corps. What other teen heroes could they easily introduce? Like, they could just introduce Speed. Ironheart. We've already met Riri. So, yeah, there's a lot of them that they could introduce. If they were smart, they would include Moon Girl in that, because I think a lot of people are a little familiar with Moon Girl from the TV cartoon. Yeah, I guess they don't have Hulk Ling. They could do that, or they could literally just include somebody like Scar, who I know we only saw very briefly on the She-Hulk show. Oh, exactly, America Chavez. America Chavez. I think that Squirrel Girl would be a good idea. Anyway, that is to say, a couple of these would not be hard to introduce, and they've got at least something like 6 characters that they could grab right now and say, this is the movie version Young Avengers. I'll be honest. If I was Marvel right now, every sort of, they don't call them waves. They call them phases, right? I would have every phase build up, maybe not every phase, maybe every other phase, but build up to, like an Avengers movie, but it doesn't necessarily have to be the Avengers. You could have the Dark Avengers. You know, that maybe the Thunderbolts become the Dark Avengers, right? You could have Young Avengers. Avengers is a brand. You could do Mighty Avengers and like grab like Luke Cage and Matt Murdock and I don't know, Moon Knight. You know what I'm saying? Like it would not be hard for them to like sort of constantly build towards a team movie. And I think that that would be a very satisfying formula to just do like introduce the characters on their own and build up to a team movie every once in a while. I feel like it's not rocket science. Yes, we could have the West Coast Day Avengers, which could have Hawkeye and Dave and Wonder Man. The rumor is that Jason Statham is going to be in the Young Avengers movie. I don't know what character he would play. I don't know. I did not hear that. Oh, that's too bad. I thought that it was doing well. All right. More news. Not much. San Diego Comic-Con. Huge convention, right? They faced some big tech issues a week ago. So their biggest registration day, not this past Saturday, the Saturday before, it got halted because of technical issues. It's going to need to be rescheduled. I haven't seen when it's been rescheduled for. Maybe they've announced something, but I missed it if that was the case. So Comic-Con held what it calls its open registration, you know, not for like the pros and the retailers, but for the everyman, you and me, that wants to buy a badge. They started it at 9 a.m. and it was halted 37 minutes later because organizers said there was an unforeseen anomaly with its registration system. As of Monday afternoon, Comic-Con had yet to announce when registration would be rescheduled, so I didn't see any update there. They also haven't said exactly what the issue was. I guess that was it. I would like to go to San Diego Comic-Con. I've actually never gone to San Diego Comic-Con, and I was giving some serious thought to it. We'll see. Oh, whoops, am I hiding? Didn't mean to do that. Wait, someone said Statham should play Egghead. Just to be clear, Egghead has already been in the movies. Egghead is Ghost's father, Ghost from Ant-Man and the Wasp and the upcoming Thunderbolts movie. Her father is the scientist that becomes Egghead, played by Michael Cerveris, who was the Watcher on that show Fringe, among other famous roles. This is a photo of me and my friend Abed, who was one of the writers on a comic called Orcs in Space. He's written for Rick and Morty, some other TV stuff. And we're here at House of Secrets in Burbank, California. That store was robbed. We talked about it briefly, but I didn't realize the extent of it. House of Secrets was robbed on Sunday, October 27th. The owner, Pete Demetriou, told KNX News that there was, quote, broken glass everywhere, an empty showcase, a wall full of emptiness, and some peculiar items stolen. Not quite sure what he means by that yet. He estimates about $80,000 in losses. Really big. I didn't realize how much had been stolen. I heard that they got broken into, but yeah. We've also had the Wizard in the MCU. The Wizard was on Jessica Jones. So, yeah, $80,000. Police are reviewing video evidence. I hope that helps. Demetriou, meanwhile, has put the word out for people to just keep an eye for the stolen comics. He said the most valuable one was Amazing Spider-Man issue 3. So that is definitely a old, great comic. That I didn't steal that. Yeah, they're a great store. They're really cool. If you haven't been, they've got this like really cool very back of the building, like sort of secret room of like golden age stuff, or an indie stuff. It's hard to remember exactly what it was, but they had a really cool, almost secret back room in the very back. So yeah, I feel for them. That sucks. I hope that there is a break in the case. And if you guys like this shirt that I'm wearing, just remember that that's available on comictropes.com. Or not comictropes.com, on my Comic Tropes YouTube channel. Jeez, I'm terrible. Dark Horse is going to spin off a popular horror graphic novel that they made. A spin-off to the horror superhero comic Beyond Mortal by Cullen Bunn and Danny Luckert. The 4-issue spin-off is called Jump Scare. That's a great title, by the way. It's going to come out in February. 4 issues starting in February. Oh, really? Maybe I don't know the owner. I got that off of a news article, so that's I don't know how they got the name wrong. I don't know. Anyway, here's what Dark Horse describes this comic as. It sounded cool to me. Strong, fast, and violent horror fan-turned-vigilante jump scare can conjure any gore-soaked weapon from any gore-soaked movie that she's watched. With this power, she's become a force for good in Empire City, hacking her way through ne'er-do-wells and monsters alike. Now her enemies want her dead, and a mobster-turned-monster grindhouse will do whatever he can to bring her down. Just sounded fun, so I decided to share that. It's an interesting power. You see a movie, you can pull that weapon out. Can you just pull out like Ash's chainsaw and attach it to your hand somehow? That would be fun. Oh, baby. Hey, baby. Yeah, what if she just leaves the weapons lying around when she's done? Just leaves a mess. Not just a bloody mess. Just leaves actual like weapon trash all over the place. 3 Worlds, 3 Moons. Finally, a comic in print. Yes. Let's talk about that. Jonathan Hickman, Mike Del Mundo, Mike Huddleston, they started a connected sci-fi shared universe that they called 3 Worlds, 3 Moons. And they've been building out that lore on Substack. They've also had a few other writers and artists contribute there. They've allowed like their subscribers to share ideas, and it's become very big, very big. Well, they just launched the first anthology, like comic book set in that world. It's called One, 200 pages. It's up on Kickstarter. There's also options to get various source books. They've got tons of lore and maps and history of this shared universe, if that's your thing. But some great artists, some great writers, could be very, very cool. 3 Worlds, 3 Moons. It's up on Kickstarter now, so I wanted to share that. I haven't read anything about it either yet, but I do trust these creators. As long as I'm talking about Kickstarter, Heavy Metal is returned, or to be more specific, Metal Hurlant. Let me explain. So, Humanoids, the European publisher, has launched a notification page on Kickstarter for an upcoming campaign, which they describe as bringing Metal Hurlant back as a quarterly anthology book starting in 2025. This year does represent the 50th anniversary of Metal Hurlant, which was an anthology sci-fi comic book magazine originally published in France. And then a decade or so later, there was an American version called Heavy Metal. So, yeah, very cool either way. Heavy Metal definitely introduced me to a lot of European artists. That was the first place I saw people like Droulet and Mobius and Milo Manara, all these people. Really, really cool. Yes, the original magazine rebooted in English. It could be cool. Could be really cool. The first issue is gonna have over 270 pages, both new stories by writers like Mark Waid, Matt Fraction, James Stokoe, Brian Michael Bendis, as well as long out of print short stories by people like Mobius, an original founder of Metal Hurlant. Probably will have short stories by the other founders too. I think that they've got the rights to all of it. So yeah, coming out through Humanoids. Didn't realize that they were involved in this. I knew Heavy Metal or Metal Hurlant, one or the other, was going to come back. It's too much of a brand name to just sort of not use. By the way, earlier we talked about Peach Momoko, and she was doing like art shows in conventions in America back in like 2014, but her introduction to doing like comic book stuff was when Grant Morrison was the editor-in-chief of Heavy Metal. And I think that was when it was still owned by Kevin Eastman, if I'm remembering right. The history of Heavy Metal is long and windy. A lot of different, not a lot, but like at least 4 different publishers have owned it. By the way, I didn't see any info in any sort of news articles about this on the unpublished version that Massive Publishing was going to make, because Massive had shown some cover art and announced some creators and stuff. I know Tony Moore did a cover, for instance. No word on what happened with any of those stories or issues, if they'll ever make it to print. I don't know. I know that some of those creators said that they weren't compensated. I couldn't find any updates on any of that. But that also wasn't like on Humanoids, who has the rights to it now. I have to imagine it will. And since it's a Kickstarter, technically you could order it there. But if you read their description on the notification page, it does mention that they plan on getting it into comic book stores and bookstores and stuff like that. So even though this is a Kickstarter to like sort of probably gauge interest and fulfill stuff initially, I'm pretty sure they do also plan on doing traditional publishing and distribution. Paolo Uliteri Serpieri, I'm not pronouncing that right, but he won an award at LUCCA this past week. Yeah. I'm pretty sure it's the same publisher. I'm pretty sure about that. I'm not an expert on Humanoids, but I'm pretty sure that it is the same. It was a great magazine. It really was. Both Metal Hurlant and Heavy Metal. I was never really disappointed with picking up an issue. I always discovered at least 1 or 2 cool stories or amazing artists at the very least. And as long as I'm sort of doing European stuff, I wanted to talk about some of the awards that went down at LUCCA, which is, it looks like a really lovely comic festival in Italy. Looked really cool. So the LUCCA Comics and Games event had their annual awards. Some of them went to comics and manga creators that you may have heard of. So there's one prestigious award that's been out for decades and decades. LUCCA delivers it now, the Yellow Kid Author of the Year Award. And that went to Taiyo Matsumoto for Tokyo These Days. That is a comic or manga that I picked up somewhat recently on the recommendation of Daniel Warren Johnson. He told me that was really good, so I trust him. So I haven't read it yet. My nephew did get it for me, and I want to read it. And it won an award. The Gran Guinigi, I don't speak Italian, so if I'm not getting it right, I do apologize. But the Best Artist Award went to Trad Moore for Doctor Strange Fall Sunrise. I got to pick that up. That's really cool to see Trad Moore recognized in a way like that. And if you ever want to see the most entertaining live art, watch Trad Moore draw. It's really hard to describe how he holds a pencil and grinds it in, but it's really cool. Gran Guinigi Best Author Award went to Kate Beaton for Ducks, 2 Years in the Oil Sands. And I know these comics aren't new this year for us, but they've been translated into Italian, so that's why they're getting noted over there. But I think that's really cool. Last thing I'll talk about was we had talked a little bit about this in a previous news item. Famous comic collection from a late collector was going to go to auction. It went for a lot of money, and it was only a small portion of that collection. So the late Christine Farrell, she owned and ran Earth Prime Comics in Burlington, Vermont. She passed away this past April at age 72. She left behind a complete collection. I knew it was a big DC Comics collection. I didn't realize it was a complete collection of every DC Comics, every DC comic since they were national from 1935 forward. So that absolutely included stuff like Action Comics #1, Detective Comics #27, Flash Comics #1, all that stuff, All-Star Comics #1. Every single one. She had a massive collection. I also would have loved to have just seen something like that. That sounds so cool. There's a few other cool elements to her collection that I want to point out. So last weekend, 489 of those comics, and as you can guess, that's pretty small portion when you're talking 1935 forward, but we're also going to be talking, those are the 489 like oldest and rarest and most valuable key issues. They went to heritage auctions, and altogether they sold for $5.26 million. 489 comics for over $5 million. And they're going to keep selling more of hers. They're getting them graded and stuff like that, of course, because it's what you got to do on old key issues, basically. I sort of get that. But yeah. Oh, I wish it went to a museum. Some of the more modern stuff, don't know exactly what, but some of it, a lot of it, I hear, is going to actually go to Earth Prime Comics and be sold there. So that's nice. But yeah, she would have had the issue of Lady Cop. Let's see. Included in her collection was a restored copy of Action Comics #1. Even restored, that's amazing because there's only 81 known copies to exist in the world. So, you know, if it's a 1.0 or if it's a restored, it doesn't matter at this point. For Action Comics #1, super valuable. That was the one that sold for the most. That went for $324,000. I think it was graded at a 6.0 restored. Flash Comics #1 was the second biggest one. That was in a 5.0 condition. It still went for $174,000. Can you imagine like a 5.0 comic going for $174,000? That's pretty big, pretty big. You know, those are the kind of prices that you typically only see on the West Coast Avengers live claim sales. I wonder how many Death of Superman black polybagged issues she had. Presumably 20. One for her and 19 to flip. One last thing that I think is very cool about Christine's collection. She never bothered to get the comics graded. And just to be clear, it's not a pedigree collection because she did not buy each of these comics herself originally off the newsstand. Some of them she filled in her collection by buying from other collections. That means it can't be a pedigree collection. If you buy every comic yourself and you assemble a massive collection with lots of notable Golden and Silver Age books, that can potentially be a pedigree collection. It's not called a pedigree. It's certainly, in my opinion, a named collection. Or, yes, hey, Nick, lovely to see you. A Providence collection. You still know the whole history of everything. I think that's so cool that not only had she assembled quietly, she was never like really bragging about like having every issue. She was quietly assembling this very cool collection, but she didn't bother to have them graded. So she was getting it for herself, not to, you know, oh, I'll get rich off of this. I think that's really cool. it would be nice to think of a collection like that staying together, but unless she specifically willed an entire collection to one person that wanted to keep it, that's just not going to happen. It gets sold off piecemeal, and all I can say is maybe that helps somebody else create a really unique collection, like a collection of all the #1 issues of the Golden Age, or all the art by Nick Cardy that ever existed. Who knows? Who knows? Yeah, they'd still note it as Providence on the collection. I think that's really cool. That's really cool. I like that nickname. Can we start calling Nick Barucci, president of Dynamite, Dr. Nick? Because I like that. I don't know how much he likes it, but I like it. I'm going to bring up something else. We're going to talk about some of the comics that came out this week, and then I'm going to draw a little bit, I think, because that wasn't tons of news. Yeah. Let me just add something here. We're going to remove that. If you had $1 million, well, good luck. I hope you do have $1 million someday. That could last you a couple months. Let's see. Share extra camera is what I'm looking to do. There we go. Hi, everybody. That would not be a hard one to assemble. All right. So we had a few big issues that came out this week. Oh, speaking of Tradmore, got the variant cover for Ultimate X-Men. Yeah, let's start with Batman: The Long Halloween, The Last Halloween. A note for DC: I think you could have just called it Batman: The Last Halloween, and I think that we would have all known what we're dealing with there. But so this is sort of the third book in that Long Halloween series. Obviously, Tim Sale no longer with us. They've still got some of his art that they can use for the cover, which is nice. Jeff Loeb's still writing them, and each issue is done by a guest artist. This one, Klaus Janson. I think that he's got a great Batman pedigree just for being the inker on Dark Knight Returns, So I'd sort of forgotten where the first issue left off, but it came back to me as I was reading this. And yeah, we're dealing with a serial killer that's targeting various people. But the thing that makes this one personal to Batman is that Commissioner Gordon's son has been kidnapped. So Batman is basically just sort of going through the gangsters, beating them up, looking for information on where Jim Gordon's son is. But it is a mystery as to who could be the villain behind things. One thing that I thought was really cool in this is, okay, so Batman's going after Penguin for information, right? And there's a chase in the city. Look at this. Look at that. Does anyone else recognize that? This might just be me, but do you see what that's an homage to that Klaus has done there? If you don't know, that's an iconic shot from the Popeye Doyle movie, The French Connection. Yep, Professor Willard, Mr. Science Snake. Isn't that cool? Not Daredevil. Sorry. French Connection. If you don't know, French Connection is just a really cool crime movie starring Gene Hackman and Roy Scheider. Really, really good. Has an incredibly intense car chase scene where the Popeye Doyle is like a cop. Gene Hackman plays him. He doesn't play by the rules, he's they chase after a criminal that's on a elevated subway car, and they're just racing the car under the street. Allegedly, they did that without permits in New York City. And there's this one intense moment sorry to talk about something from the 1970s and spoil a little of this scene. All of us, because he's looking up and driving real fast, and he doesn't realize he's about to hit a lady with a baby carriage, and he hits the baby carriage and it goes flying, and he is horrified. But fortunately for him, it was a bag lady, and it was a baby carriage full of cans for her to collect. Oof, it is an intense scene. Ooh, my favorite Friedkin movie is probably To Live and Die in LA. Great crime movie. Just great modern noir movie. So underrated. Great question, because those are three fantastic car chases. French Connection, Bullet, Ronin. I like all of them. I will probably give it to French Connection. And I think it would go in that order for me. French Connection, then Bullet, then Ronin. So, yeah, really, really. Anyway, just thought that was a cool moment. I would say that the art in this is really cool. I love that homage. Fun to see Batman in a mystery setting. That is my favorite version of Batman. Yes, he gets into sort of martial arts fights and stuff like that, but at the core of it, I love a good crime story where he's figuring it out. That's my favorite type of Batman story. Batman can do sci-fi and, like overt superhero stuff. He could go up against Sinestro if you wanted him to, but that's my favorite. All right. Wolverine Revenge, the Red Band edition. It's such a funny gimmick, but sure, I'll pay for the extra gore. This issue is, as the cover indicates, Wolverine versus Colossus, and it's sad. Obviously, they're teammates. This takes place. It's essentially a long what if story. It's a world where Magneto died. They explain it here. It's Jonathan Hickman, so you sort of get these big recap pages. Magneto died, and when he did, he released a huge EMP blast that killed all technology on Earth. So instantly, airplanes and what do you call it? Hospitals, everything stopped working. Lots of people died. The goal now is to get a power source to try to save people, but Wolverine specifically is on a mission after the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He's already gone after Mastermind and Sabretooth. In this one, he goes after several. He's going after Omega Red. He gets to Russia. He's going after Omega Red. He goes after Deadpool, who feels terrible about being part of this. And he goes after Colossus, his former teammate. It's not 100% clear yet why, but they're all part of this organization for some reason. And yeah, it's pretty sad, honestly. It's pretty sad. Wolverine is mad in this, and that does work well for the character. I won't spoil it, but especially the way he treats Deadpool is absolutely merciless. Just really, and the fight against, he calls him Petey because they're friends, or they have been. But Wolverine isn't forgiving anybody in this, and it's a brutal fight. It's you know what? Look, it's a little dark, so it might not be your cup of tea. I think the art is pretty fantastic. I think it looks like Greg Capullo's having a good time, and really putting a lot of effort into the art. Without getting into a spoiler, I'll just say that Wolverine and Wade have a conversation on top of a nuclear reactor that's not working right. It's melting down. And obviously they can both sort of heal from it, but every once in a while there are these blasts, and they're just smoking, and their skin is boiling, and it's pretty weird. They're both pretty what word am I searching for here? you know, they're both mad at themselves and willing to sort of like take on a lot of pain as a type of penance. It's really cool. There are some other heroes in this world but most of them are gone. There was an initial mission with Captain America, Winter Soldier, and Wolverine, and the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants basically took them all out. You like the reference to X-Men Origins? Yeah. Yep. I think that Jonathan Hickman was having a little bit of fun in this, to be clear. Even though it's dark, it's not like it's completely serious. We are dealing with, a pretty simple superhero revenge story. But it's fun for what it is. It's dark is all. It's dark. But I did enjoy it. I really did. I'm not going to lie. It's a blast. If you like things like Dirty Harry movies or something like that's what this is. There are some characters in this that have remorse. Yeah. And it hurts to see them going through that. It's really well done. Very expressive characters, actually. Like, it's not the easiest thing, I think, to make guys in masks where their eyes are, whited out to make them like emotional. But because it's a comic, you can play with that a little bit. And I think that you're seeing a lot of, remorse and regret with both of these characters. And I give Greg Capullo a lot of credit for being so expressive with characters that are in masks. It's really impressive. Do I have anything new that I can say about Ultimate X-Men? The only thing I'll say for sure is that last month I was reading the name of like the main characters, and I realized that I'd overlooked this smaller supporting character, Natsu Tsukishima, who's just a friend of Nico Minoru, known as Sister Grimm in the main universe. But all of a sudden I was like, oh, like last month, oh, Natsu, that's Summer. Not Summer, Tsukishima, Scott Summers. It took me a while. I was right, because this issue does have one brief moment where Natsu is confronted by some bullies from school. All the main characters in this, by the way, are like school kids, which I think is amazing. They throw a can at her, it gets zapped, right? But like look at that. Like, she's got one red eye, and when she fires a laser, like she cries a little bit of blood. That's so eerie and different. And I think that that's an important part of Mutants. I think that's an important part of Mutants, is to make them just a little off. Not always like total monsters or there's one or two that will be like Nightcrawler or Beast or something that like, well, they just can't fit in. They can't blend in. But I think it's cool when like they're just a little off, and I think that like they get that really well with this super quick little scene here. I like that these are the like characters that I know, but they're different. I like that Isako armor has this like red armor, but it looks specifically like a samurai. I think it's really a cool book that does some really cool, creepy stuff. This is like a little scary. I just also want to point out Dynamite, DC, and Marvel all had tributes to John Cassaday in their books. And John Cassaday did co-create Armor, who's obviously an important character, like the main character really in this book. Yeah, she's the main character. It's too bad that we lost him. I didn't even catch this before, but they say this issue is dedicated to John Cassaday. That's nice. That's nice. I would have been very curious to hear his thoughts on this interpretation of his character. The title of the book, this is Ultimate X-Men. Strongly recommended. Really cool. You don't need to know anything else about Marvel or other X-Men or other Ultimate stuff. It's very much a self-contained story. It deals with mutants. It deals with cults. It deals with it takes place in Japan, and all the main characters are school children. So you're going to get some cultural differences. One cool thing is that the team that writes this, Peach and Zach Davison, always give us like a page at the back that have some details on maybe a cultural element that was featured in the book, from, games that kids play in Japan to the bikes that they ride to ideas on the supernatural or charms. It really sort of teaches you a little bit about it. And I think that this is my favorite of the Ultimate series right now. It's very self-contained. It's telling a great story. Oh, that was a really good moment. Yeah, just as long as we're talking about the great John Cassidy. Where was that in here? Yeah. He and Joss Whedon did a great run on Astonishing X-Men. Colossus had been dead for a long time. Kitty Pryde sees him and is just totally shocked. Colossus runs through her because her power is phasing, and her reaction is just like, she still hasn't really reacted. She's like, did I just see the love of my life back in front of me? So well done. God, he was great. Very cool book. Very cool book. If you're not reading Blood Squad 7, it's a really great book for two things. One, telling a story that's more of a sort of like government ops take on superheroes. And second, literally commenting on the 30-year history of Image Comics, because Blood Squad 7 is definitely riffing on ideas from Youngblood. It looks great. Paul Fry is a really nice artist, nice clean style. Couple, I'm not trying to say that his work is reminiscent of another artist, but if you haven't seen him and you need a touch point, what I'll say is that I see elements of artists like, say, Stuart Immonen or something like that. Really nice, clean, grounded. Every character looks like a different person, different body types, different facial expressions, good panel-to-panel storytelling. This is also riffing on, of course, the old Image Comics things, where you'd get the standalone issue, hey, wait, it's been 5 months since I've seen Youngblood. Oh, this issue's, Youngblood Blood Strike. It's like some one-shot fill-in thing. It's sort of like that, but this is the main artist and writer. It's just sort of like an annual, I'll call it, but they call it Strikefile. And it is a standalone story within this world, but it also moves the overall story forward, both filling us in on the history of Blood Squad 7 and where this team is going. Man, I think that would be awesome. I suppose, I feel like there's a small chance they could at least get him to do a cover or a pinup, Joe Casey wrote the Youngblood book for Rob. Rob is bringing Youngblood back to Image Comics. I say Rob's writing and drawing it, but he's not, I don't think he owns the property anymore, but they're bringing him onto it, and it is going to be published through Image. So I don't know. I feel like there's a chance. By the way, Paul Fry, great British artist. He made me feel like $1 million during New York Comic Con. I'm just walking down the city streets of New York late at night. It's dark. All of a sudden I hear a British voice goes like, "Comic tropes." Terrible impression, I know. I was like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Oh, I watch your show where I draw. I'm Paul Fry." I'm like, "I know who Paul Fry is. Thank you." Anyway, it just was very nice, because I'm just on the city streets. It wasn't at the convention. Wouldn't have expected it. Made me feel very good. But I sincerely have been enjoying Blood Squad 7. It's also a little bit of satire. Maybe I should have made that clear. Joe Casey's a funny guy. This is a pretty funny issue. Oi! He's comic troops, isn't it? That's not quite how he sounded. Don't have a lot to say about Nightclub 2. This is like almost my guilty pleasure. I like it. I think Juan and Ramirez is a really good artist. I just don't have a lot to say this week. Feral is cool. In this issue, the one thing that they do differently, there's some kittens in danger. Up till now, we've had house cats, but in this, we've got some kittens. And as somebody that owns some kittens and sees them explore and try to turn everything in the world into a toy, and you know, they can't see that like some fish out in the open is obviously a trap in this dangerous world. And the way they talk is super adorable, but they're in a very dangerous world. And yeah, it made me legit worried for them. I was definitely like worried for because they're new characters and they seem extra vulnerable. I have a couple of things to tell you about my kittens in a second, because Jack has especially been a little naughty. I'll also point out, though, that Trish Forstner does something interesting. We've seen almost all of the art, has this nice animated quality to it. I've said before, it reminds me a little of like Dawn Bluth, but it's its own thing. She's great. We get like a real person in this, but we don't see their face yet or anything, but it's like captured them. And look at how much more, I'll just say detailed and textured. Textured might be a better word. Textured this panel is of like, a person, the car, the house, the woods. Everything just looks much darker and more intricate. And it's an interesting contrast to the world. And what it made me feel like is, even though we've seen like these cats talking to each other and stuff like that, as soon as we see like a human, the art style changes and we see things a little bit more from like a person's perspective. You know what I mean? I thought that was pretty clever for that panel. It literally made rats the scary monster in this one. Tiny little rats, hard, like rabid rats, hard to run away from them because they can sneak into just about anything. No, Jack has not been smoking. Last one I'll talk about is, I thought that issues 1 through 6 told the full story of Simon Pure, this immortal who was originally, a mercenary during the Revolutionary War, accidentally became immortal. His sidekick in that was a super young, who's the famous scientist? Hold on a sec. Albert Einstein. But this is almost like a coda to that. He in Albert's last days, Simon goes to meet this guy that he went on this huge epic adventure. And, to Albert Einstein, it's like the beginning and end of his life, bookended by this guy he really admires and thinks that has all this potential to become something better and help humanity in a huge way. And Simon, of course, just thinks of himself as a fuck up, to be honest. He doesn't think he's got that potential. It's really charming, though, even if he doesn't think much of himself, like he legit cares for Albert. And it's really lovely seeing him like check in on his friend. It's a really lovely epilogue to the story. It makes a small point that he dressed up for this. Like he normally, doesn't really like shave or take care of himself. Like that, he has made a supreme effort to be presentable and to remind Albert of, their first meeting. And it's a big deal for him because he is a bit of a screw up. Exactly. Einstein is somebody that helped humanity. And I think that this is a clever way of utilizing utilizing the contrast in somebody that's, so disciplined and smart against somebody that's, just got no direction in life, doesn't seem to be the smartest. But like Albert really thinks that Simon is something special. He's like, no, like it takes some of us like our entire lives to then like look back and reflect and potentially change into a better version of ourselves. And by then it's so late that it's harder and stuff. He's like, you've got an advantage. You can live for so long that like, you can discover those things about yourself, and you can improve yourself, before the end of your life. It's really cool. Oh, the art is incredible. Just to be clear, folks, I will be having Jeff Johns and Brian Hitch on the show very soon on comic tropes. So we'll do a deep dive into their work. So anyway, good week for comics. Why don't I do a little bit of inking? Because I had like drawn this on the show ages ago and never really got around to inking it. But tonight I've got a little while. So let's do it. And if you've got any questions or anything, the floor is now open. We'll talk about whatever appeals to all of you. Hopefully it's comic book related. But yeah, we'll just talk about whatever. So if you've got a question, have at it, Hoss. Oh, and by the way, I don't know if you noticed, but I'm wearing my I voted sticker because I got to vote early here. And I would just encourage you, without getting too deep into the politics. It's very charged, obviously, right now, with tomorrow being election day. But let's just keep it positive and say, I encourage you to vote. I really do. I did. I talked a little bit about it, I think, last week. I haven't read that one. No, I've seen it on the shelf, but I haven't read it. Venom 3, it was okay, is what I'll call it. I would say I'd call it okay. What do I say about Venom 3? It's kind of funny. It moves at a decent enough pace. I think that like my biggest problem at the end of the day is that there's really no villain that has a personal connection to our protagonists, at least that we don't see them interact. The big bad is essentially some monsters, so some symbiote monsters. What do they call them? Xenophages. They don't talk though, so we never really see anybody like do anything very personal. And I think that it's really important in a superhero movie to have a way for your hero and protagonist to hopefully meet once or twice, even briefly, before their big battle at the end. I think it's really important to find a way to fit that in, because otherwise there's just, it feels very impersonal. I would say that that's my biggest sort of problem with it. And the thing that I was joking about last week, and I'll do it again, is just it's so funny to me how much they try to build something up for a big fight, only for it to absolutely amount to nothing in the movie. There's this big general that's going after capturing Venom, right? And he calls this shadowy figure, this mysterious figure who we actually never really get to even see who he's talking to. And he's like, permission to call in the Six. And the shadowy figure's like, that's a big request. Permission granted. He's like, all right, I'm going to send the Six after Venom. The Six is just 6 soldiers. Nothing special at all about them. They absolutely fail. Nothing interesting happens with that at all. It's so bizarre to me that they try to build that up as like, we're sending in a big deal team. No, it's nothing. It's absolutely nothing. It amounts to nothing. Very strange. Yeah. So I don't have a lot more to say than that. I'm trying to make my way through. I've never seen the Terrifier movies, so I'm watching it. Boy, is it gory! Boy, is it gory! I'm curious why it's so popular. I was curious why the third movie was able to beat Joker 2 at the box office in Joker 2's second week. I'm like, Joker had a $200 million budget, and the first movie made $1 billion. I was like, but Terrifier 3 beat it. I'm not sure why it's so popular now. The only thing I can figure, Jamilin, is like, yeah, maybe they thought that they could take the line and use it in the trailer to trick us. I did notice that there's a point where some soldiers are getting torn up at the end of the movie, and one of them says, Thompson is down. I assume that's supposed to be a hint at Flash Thompson in case they want to do Agent Venom. I don't know, though. You're saying that's all it is to Terrifier? It's just to the point? Maybe. What else have I seen lately? Oh, Penguin is good. Penguin, like, I guess we've just got our one more episode to wrap that up, but that's been strong. Anybody else been watching Penguin? It's a good crime show. Oh, I know what I'm not telling you. I'm in pain. I've been like sucking it up this whole time, and all of a sudden I realize, like, I might as well talk about that. It's just a story. And it's Jack's fault. So 2 nights ago, I'm just laying down in bed playing with my phone, and to my left, I've got a shelf in my bedroom, and at the top of it, I had a really big Lego set. Had the whole Harry Potter castle in like a micro scale. It was big though. Well, Jack jumped up there and he just shoved it off. He just shoved it off the shelf. Happened really fast. It obviously made a huge crash sound. It's fine, whatever. I can pick up the bricks. It's not that big a deal, but it surprised me. And 2 things happened in that moment as it crashed. Everybody was surprised. Well, Lily was by my feet. She was resting by my feet. When she heard that crash, she jumped up, landed on my chest, and then launched from that about 12 feet to this hammock that she's got up on the window in the room. And at the same time, I was rapidly, that hurt just to do that. I rapidly twisted towards the sound of the crash. And I don't know which of the 2 things did it, but I pulled a muscle in my chest. It was instant, like super sharp pain. So bad. I've never torn anything in here. And I think it's probably a small tear because I am feeling better every day. But I was in so much pain at first. I thought I was having a heart attack. I could not believe how intense this pain was. And it still hurts, like when I breathe in deep or move my shoulders in certain ways, or like get up or down, like crunching my abs. The only positive I'll say to this is, as an artist, it makes me like realize what muscles are connected to different things. Cause I just feel I'm very hyper aware of like, even just like these little moves here, I feel it a little bit right in my sternum. And you can just feel how the muscles are connected and how much they're tied together. I blew a pec unloading trucks as a teenager, and yeah, it is blinding. I don't think I did anything that bad, just to be clear. It's probably like just a small like tear or something like right here, although it's still very sensitive. and it feels like something heavy is sort of like pushing on me all the time. You've also had muscle tears? It was, I went to work the next morning because I was like feeling better than I was the night before. But after about 2 or so hours, just sort of like moving around, even like at first, like typing and getting up and down from my chair, it was so painful that I actually had to use some sick time. I felt bad about it, but I had to use some sick time because it was agony. I should be okay by tomorrow, I bet. I mean, I'll still feel it, but I think I can do everything. So that was Jack. Jack thinks everything is a toy. Jack makes his own entertainment when you're not entertaining him. And he, I guess, just thought, oh, let's just see what happens when I just sort of put my paws on this and shove it. He did another thing like not quite a week ago. And this shows you both how smart he is and how that smartness is like almost a liability for him. So my cats love jumping into the shower after I take a shower. They think it's fun to sort of splash around on the like bits of water in there. They don't mind it at all. So I've started getting this like tinier tub that I'll fill up with hot water when I come out of the shower, and I'll put something that floats on it, and Jack and Lily will splash in the water and bat the floating thing back and forth. I call it tub time, and they like it. It's cute. They like it so much that when I was in New York, I bought a tiny floating rubber ducky that just had like an I Love New York shirt on. I was like, I'm getting a toy for my cat, but whatever. And he's been enjoying it. He plays with it. He bats it back and forth. Well, after they do that and the water gets cold, I pour out the little tub and I put the duck up on a shelf in the bathroom, which happened to be next to my shaving razor. I've got like one of those fogless mirrors, and I usually shave in the shower. Well, Jack jumped up to get his duck and then decided he also wanted to play with my razor. So he knocked that down into the tub part and was batting that around, and he cut his little toe bean. Not too deep, but like there were like these little blood tracks all over the bathroom, and Chrissy had to bandage up his paw. He's fine now. It wasn't like deep, it wasn't much. But that's what I mean by like he's too smart for his own good. Like he went for his toy and then decided to play with something else and didn't realize that was not a toy. So he's a rascal is what I call him. He's my rascal. I'm sure that some of you have like dogs or something that do things like that. I'm not used to it with cats. They're usually more sedate. Ooh, you broke a couple ribs? I've never done that. I bet it's worse than whatever I'm dealing with. Too much to draw for a month. Wow. I can't believe you left the razor out where he could extract it from its container and play with it. I didn't think he would jump up on this shelf that I've got. I know to hide it a little bit more now. I sincerely didn't think there was any way that my cats would be getting anywhere near that stuff. I definitely try to take care of them and keep them safe. I feel a lot of responsibility for them, but yeah, I guess I failed as a cat dad there. What else is new? In January, I take another trip. That's still a ways out, obviously, but I'm gonna take a few days in Hawaii, going to Oahu, and then going to Japan for a little bit. So that'll be fun. I'm looking forward to getting a small break. What else? Oh, I didn't realize, but an artist that I like, David Nakayama, lives in Honolulu. So there's a good chance we might just meet up briefly for like, coffee or lunch or something like that. But he's like, he does some great covers, really great. He's doing a Ninja Turtles series of covers these days. He hasn't done Donatello yet, but I did get a Michelangelo one. Very, very cool stuff. It sounds like LUCCA, the Italian comics festival, was really nice. Boy, I would love to go back to Italy. That's been a long time since I've been to Italy, but what a beautiful, beautiful country. Like physically beautiful. Whoops. The art piece is looking great. Do you have an artist you're influenced by when it comes to TMNT? Only thing is, like, it all starts with the way that Laird and Eastman would sort of draw the turtles. And then, I don't know. That's where it all starts for me. It's like living with a little psychotic super acrobat. My dog likes to shit on the sidewalk. Oh. I have a chihuahua who thinks it's a cat. Oh, cool. I'm glad that you're enjoying Dark Ride. I think it's quite cool. Boy, the road is rough. It's cool. It's very cool. What are my controversial comic opinions? I mean, I've apparently, like, when I said things like, oh no, what happened? Oh no. Hold on. Good question, but that's weird. Let me try something. It said that my browser lost its connection to the extra camera, but the camera itself looks fine. Does that look okay? I think that the USB just came loose. Oh my God. Wait, was that a ghost? Yelp. Was spooky. Yeah, it went out for a minute. I think that the USB just got a little loose is all. I don't know. That was weird. That was very weird. That was the weird. Oh my God. That definitely was paranormal activity. And you know what? It feels. Is it just me, or does it feel a little colder here? What's that sound? What did I just hear? Yeah, it's probably Jack's fault. You saw a ghost behind me? What if, like, I was looking at my monitor and I also saw the ghost in the monitor, but then I turn around and it's not there. And every time I look at the monitor, it's closer and you guys can see it getting closer, but I'm turning around and I'm acting like there's nothing there. And you're all seeing like something get closer to me. That would be awesome. I should have done that for Halloween. My favorite phrase that slots into the Ninja Turtles title cadence: Teenage Mutant Violent Ninja Turtles. Oh, that's really upsetting. We've dealt with a little bit of that in the US, but yeah, a lot of the world is dealing with big floods. It's very frustrating. But thank you for sharing that. Obrigado. Oh yeah, right. Controversial comic takes. Apparently, it was controversial when I said that I didn't really care for Vince Coletta's inking. I don't think I'm the only one that thinks that, but yeah, that not everybody likes my take on that. I mean, I've got strong opinions that probably lots of people don't agree with. I think that there are plenty of good Marvel and DC comics these days, and and if you look at social media, you get the impression that there are plenty of people that think that that those comics have gotten very political, and I don't think that they have. So I don't know. That's a controversial take within a small portion, I think, of the reading problem. Not problem. The reading populace. Thank you very much. Thank you. I don't know. I'd have to think if I've got anything that's that controversial. I guess that, there's some artists that I'm not necessarily as big a fan as other people, and sometimes it is because of like who they are. But okay, I'll try to go into detail with one. I think, for instance, that Robert Crumb is a hugely influential comic book artist, a hugely influential artist, and I like a lot of his art. I love the stuff he did in American Splendor. I love Mr. Natural. I think that, the underground stuff he did where he's like lusting over women with big booties has not aged well. And that's probably a controversial take. I think a lot of people would be like, oh, it was fine when it came out. And sometimes I can look at pieces in a historical context, and sometimes I can't. I don't know what the line is. I really don't. So maybe that's a controversial take, that I sometimes can't enjoy all of Robert Crumb's comics. I can enjoy some of them, but not all of them. Is that a controversial take? Maybe. I'm trying to remember the Korvac saga. I mean, I remember Michael Korvac came back in time. The Guardians of the Galaxy teamed up with the Avengers, and what did they just beat him with, like a cosmic cube or something? I don't remember right now. I'd have to reread it. I don't remember right now. Yeah, Frank Miller. I'd probably be like, I'd probably have a hard time parsing out right now how I feel about Frank, because I was a massive fan of Frank Miller, 80s and 90s stuff. Massive fan. And I don't love, well, I legit just flat out dislike Holy Terror. But then I think he's sort of come back in a lot of ways. I don't know. I don't mind his current sort of cartoony, blocky style. I don't love all of it, but some of it I like. He did a piece of the Maker for the Ultimate universe, and I was like, yeah, that's kind of cool, actually. He wants to rule the world, but then he and Moondragon say he's good, actually, after they beat him. It's just not ringing a bell right now. I've read it, and it's just not coming to me right now. I'd have to reread it. That's probably pretty fair to say. Really high highs and really low lows. I think that's pretty fair to say. I think he had, he hasn't talked about it a lot, but he did open up this year and say that he did have a problem with alcohol, and I think that was when he was producing the work that I would put at the low end, and I think that he's definitely improved and become very confident with what he does. Sorry, I stopped drawing because these were interesting questions. Thank you. The toughest thing for me when I draw a Ninja Turtle is trying to make sure that they still seem turtly enough. And I don't know if I did make this one turtly enough, but I definitely like to give my turtles a little bit of a beak. Not quite what some artists do, but more than probably most. You know what's interesting? Have you guys seen how almost all the Kickstarters now will have a option after the campaign ends to give late campaign pledges? I don't know when that became a thing, but I've noticed that it's definitely a thing on almost every Kickstarter campaign I've followed. And that's really interesting to me that like is that a default option now, or do you have to pay extra to do it? I don't quite understand how that works. I think it's actually a good idea to like sort of have an end date to a campaign, but have the option to then still buy in. I do think that's a good idea, but I don't know how you do it. Like, is that every campaign now, or do you have to like, I don't know. How does that work? Which turtle would make the best Doctor Who companion? You know, at first I'd say Donatello because he's the nerd, but actually you need a contrast to the Doctor on some way that challenges him. So it would either be Raphael with his like, you know, anger and fighting ability, or it would be Michelangelo and his like, you know, humor and levity. Like both of those would be a good either foil or contrast to the Doctor. So, yeah. Only seen late rewards, so no. It's like you could just still buy in. And I knew you could do that on like Indiegogo, but I didn't see it until somewhat recently on Kickstarter. And I was like, oh, interesting. So, like, if somebody was like, they just somehow didn't hear about it, but there's still like a period where they can still buy in. It still has to get successfully funded, you know? But I'm like, yeah, if there should be a window between when something is complete as a campaign, but also before it truly gets fulfilled, there should be a window there that you could just still buy in and support it. I don't know. Yes, Martha Washington is definitely underrated. Hmm. I am a Star Trek fan, I think. I would not call myself a huge expert on a couple areas because I haven't watched all of the original series, and I think I've only seen one episode of Voyager. I really don't know Voyager at all. Um, as far as like my favorite series, it's probably Deep Space Nine. Here's a controversial take. I love Strange New Worlds. I love it. It's episodic. It's a likable cast and crew. I feel like they've come across interesting mysteries and stuff like that, and I like it a lot. I'm also drawing a little slow on this because you know this is a cover for somebody, and I don't want to make a mistake. I'm not a confident artist the same way like you know anybody that does a monthly book is. I love drawing. I think sometimes when I plan it out well, I can produce an okay drawing, but I've never been like a fast, confident artist, if that makes sense. It's tricky. It's tricky, tricky. Here we go. Oh, I've checked out a bunch of original series. I'm just saying I've never watched all of the episodes, especially not like most of season 3, but I've seen I think all the I've seen just about all the big episodes. I think so too. DS9 does take a while to get going. I will say that. Season 1's pretty good. Season 2, I do feel drags. Season 3 starts introducing some really good stuff. And then by season 4 through the end, I think they did 9 seasons. Great. Just great. That said, you know, they were making up to 26 episodes a year of DS9. That's one every other week for an entire year. that is an insane amount of output compared to like what people do for TV shows now, where you might get 8 episodes of most shows. You know, I think that America has largely transitioned to the sort of British model of, you know, more of like a planned small series. There's not as many shows that are made to be like 20 to 22 a year. There's a few sitcoms, a few dramas, but not most of them. It's just wild to think 26 episodes a year. They were cranking them out. I'm glad a bunch of people are watching it. It's really cool. You know, I haven't ever seen a Superman and Lois. I know a lot of people love that one. I did like overall the Arrowverse, and I understand it's not really part of that, right? It's like sort of a parallel world or something. But maybe that is to its advantage. I'm going to double check what other sort of pens I have here. I just need to throw down some big blacks on some of this. Does anybody have like an all-time favorite show that they've like watched several times? I don't know that I've got a show that I've watched several times. I've rewatched some shows, but I don't know if I've rewatched several times or anything. Yeah, this is what I need. I am going to go back to this at some point. I'm not going to be able to finish this tonight, but I'm going to like throw in an all black background, and then I'm going to get some whiteout pens and draw streaks of rain over this. I think it'll look good. Law and Order and MASH, Twin Peaks and Fargo 3 times. I have watched Twin Peaks at least twice. Twice is, I think, the most I've watched any show. The Arrowverse kept most of the entertainment industry in Vancouver going. News Radio, Breaking Bad, Community. I love it. I love it. Arrested Development, I've also seen at least twice. And BoJack, got it. Next Generation, great through season 4, and then a letdown after the writers left for DS9. I sort of know what you mean. Season 7 of Next Generation is almost funny how many episodes are like blah, blah, blah's father comes to visit. Blah, blah, blah's brother comes to visit. Like, it's just family visiting every other episode of that season. True Detective Season 1 3 times, if not 4. Life is a flat circle. I love Community. I'm biased, but yeah, I love it. By the way, okay, a couple people here saying that they love Community. Somebody that directed a bunch of episodes on that, also a comic book creator, Rob Schraub. Well, on this channel, Jim and I had Rob join us to review Halloween 3. So I strongly encourage you to give that a watch. Even if you don't care about the movie or have never watched our movie reviews before, Schraub is a funny guy, and he has a lot of good stuff in the episode. I think that you'll like it. I strongly encourage you to give it a try if you haven't before. Really funny, talented guy. I'm a big fan. It was a pleasure to have him on our show. A real pleasure. Yeah, True Detective Season 1 is amazing. You know, I never really watched X-Files, but I did love it when it was coming out. Really loved it. Somebody said MST3K, I think. Young Justice, Transformers Prime, got it. It was legitimately sweet and hilarious seeing Jim Mahfood absolutely fanboy out at Rob. Well, they're real friends, so like, I think that Jim does admire Rob, but like they know each other. Like I'm pretty sure Jim was at Rob's wedding. Homicide: Life on the Streets. Man, people forget, but that is a great show. Great drama. Really, really good. I always remember the episode with Vincent D'Onofrio. He's been pushed onto a subway there in Baltimore, and he's caught between the train and the tracks. Like his midsection is trapped, and he's dying. But they also have realized that as soon as they get the train to go, it's going to kill him instantly. Like it's just holding just enough blood in place that, he's going to, like, stay alive for a little while they've got it pinned like that. So the detectives are up against the clock, not to save his life. That's going to be impossible, unfortunately, but to hopefully find out who did it and to find the guy's estranged daughter so that he can say goodbye to her before he dies. Such a tense episode. Really, really good, folks. Really good. Do you think Zeb Wells will only be remembered for his infamous Spider-Man run? Because Spider-Man fans never forget or forgive. Just ask Dan Slott. No. I think that Zeb will do just fine. I think Zeb has written a bunch of stuff before. And even though it's gotten... Look, both the Dan Slott and the Zeb Wells run have definitely gotten a lot of criticism. But here's the other thing. They sell pretty darn well. So, like, not everybody hates it. I didn't love it. I did like the Dan Slott run. I didn't like the Zeb Wells run as much, so I did drop that one. But I'm willing to go like, yeah, the numbers are better than fine. So it totally is. Yeah. No kidding. Reed Diamond and Kyle Secor are doing a rewatch podcast for Homicide. That's really cool to know. Yeah, Frank's stroke on Homicide. There was a great episode where Bruce Campbell was like the guest star, and he was like a dirty cop, if I'm remembering right. He was really good on that. That was like, if you ever want to see Bruce Campbell not do campy, just do straight like drama, you're like, oh, if he, those were the roles he was getting, he would do just fine. Bruce Campbell does really good serious work. He's very funny, obviously. I think it's smart for him to lean into his comedic talents, but he can also do just straight drama very, very well. Greatest American hero. Oh, cool. Why are those numbers fine? ASM has been a garbage fire. But that's just your opinion. Not everybody's opinion is the same, is all I'm saying. And I'm okay with that. Like, not everything has to be for me. And I'm like, okay, I wasn't, I wanted to be into it. I do personally like John Romita Jr.'s Spider-Man art quite a bit. So I was reading it for a while. Just wasn't really feeling the story. Decided to drop it. But you know what? I might jump back on at some point in the future. I'm at the point where I follow, like, writers and artists more than I follow a character. I do have some of my favorite characters, but I don't feel the need to, like, keep up with continuity or anything like that. To me, that just stopped meaning anything at a certain point. Continuity can be a useful tool, but it can also be a real albatross if you just feel obligated to get it, right and have it all match more than like just tell a good story. I don't know. I don't know that Sony, first of all, definitely is making an Agent Venom movie. I saw that rumor, but I don't know if that's really true. We'll see. What am I at? I'm at 2.5 hours. I guess I should wrap it up. I have no idea what Zeb and Rick would come up with. I really don't, but I'm curious. Gavin, nice to see you here. Lurking while working on a commission, wanted to pop in and say that's my approach too. Gavin's been doing some beautiful work, most recently, some Birds of Prey issues. But yeah, great stuff. Thank you, Gavin. need you to do some New Orleans stuff. Now that I know that that's where you're from, need who else? What other superhero characters or comics characters? But what other superhero characters aside from Gambit are from New Orleans or nearby? You'd think that like DC would probably have somebody from such a prominent city. Nothing comes to mind though. Shadow Man. You're right. Shadow Man is from New Orleans, playing his saxophone in the City of the Dead. I should write down my cat stories. You ever want to read a good cat story? I really think that Junji Ito's stories about Yawn and Moo are pretty damn funny. I appreciate the kind words. Thank you. Who knows? Maybe. Monica Rambeau. Thank you, ChemDog. I knew there was at least one other in Marvel. Swamp Thing is from New Orleans? Was he? Maybe he was. I feel like that was all took place down in the Florida Everglades, and that's where he was from. Amanda Waller? Maybe. I don't know about that. Hawkman was based in New Orleans once upon a time. Marvel has several. Yeah. Yeah, he was just created in the Everglades, right? Madame Xanadu. I'm not an expert on Madame Xanadu. Man Thing is definitely Florida. I guess I don't remember about Swamp Thing. Well, we'll just have to pull up Trash Movie Bonanza where Jim and I review the Swamp Thing movie, right? That's the canon for figuring it out. Sorry, I there's more to Gavin than just being from New Orleans. I've just got a lot of passion for New Orleans, having lived there for my college years. I love that city. So cool. So cool. So it's just fun to think about. I really do hope you guys will check out Jamar Nicholas's book, Leon. If not for you, for like maybe, like a family member or something. I sincerely do enjoy it. It was really cool to get to talk to somebody who's, worked in that world of comics through like book publishers, like big book publishers. Boy, I've got a friend, Chuck, who's just a phenomenal storyteller, great artist. He's created a whole children's book that I think is sincerely something really special. But he's having a heck of a time trying to figure out how to get a literary agent, which is some of what Jamar was talking to us about. It's that's I think the trickiest path into comics is figuring out like a literary agent to go the book route. And if you've got the right book, like that is the right place for you. And I think that is the right place for Chuck, but it's a tricky path. It's a tricky path. You're a good sport. Thank you. It should be if it isn't. So that makes sense. Oh, I can't forget. Yeah, there's my controversial opinion. I don't know a lot about Madame Xanadu. On the topic of swamp dudes, more folks need to learn about the Heap. Yeah, the Heap is the first popular swamp creature, and I don't know who was that originally through. I know Aircell, I think, had the rights for a while. I can't remember who originally had the rights to that, but it is public domain, I guess. Yeah. Right. He was, I don't remember now. I got to look that up. Well, I think that that's about all I'm going to be able to ink tonight for this Leonardo. Um, you know, just finish some line work, add some shadows and texture. I think I'm going to add some like sort of spots and hopefully some good leathery textures on his weapons and gear. Do some, I might do more detail on the shell, like actually give it like little lined ridges. I might do that. And then I'll go back in with like whiteout and add some raindrops. Raindrops keep falling on Leonardo. But that doesn't mean that you have to watch that. Let's see. There's a good chance I think I could possibly have the comic tropes I'm working on out this coming weekend. I hope. Taking a look at a great Spider-Man story. I was joking earlier. I can't always do Spider-Man and Batman, but sometimes I like to. And I think I've got a really good one that I want to talk about. Man, I've got so many episode ideas right now. So many episode ideas. I'm going to call it a night. If you need more comic book news, let's see, Bronze Age Nerd was in the chat. His show starts in like 20 some minutes, and he sort of also riffs on the news with his friend Bigby McFly, the comic book guy. It's on the Bronze Age Nerd channel. And then what else do I have coming up? Jim and I are going to watch a movie that I know nothing about called Black Roses, I think. So I don't know what that one is. And I am going to force Jim to watch some bad comic book movies soon. So an episode on Craven to capitalize on Craven Mania. Yes, it's Cravening time. Let's see what else. I'm looking forward to that Spidey episode. I hope I do it justice is all, but thank you, man. And West Coast Avengers, of course, also has a lovely channel. He's got some great interviews up right now, and he's got a really fun one. I like plugging people that I know. Dave did a great thing where as he was doing interviews with these guests, he was asking them about their favorite horror movies. And I know we're just past Halloween, but I think it's still a really cool episode. He's got an episode about 50 minutes of comic book artists talking about their favorite horror. And that's pretty fun. I really do think it's good. So thank you all for being here. It's meant a lot to me. Tell you what, you get the double salute to end things. You earned that. You earned that much. And again, if you haven't done early voting, I really do encourage you to vote. I don't think that that's political to encourage people to vote. It's our responsibility here in the States. You know, it's not just a privilege. I think it's a huge part of shaping the government that we want. And I wish us all luck in getting there. Let's see if we can enact some positive changes in our world. I don't know. So I just encourage that. And I'm looking forward to talking to all of you next week. Hopefully I have a comic tropes up before then, working on lots of stuff. Take care. Keep reading comics. Good night, please. Take care.